Hello everyone and welcome to another Tempo Storm Wild Meta Hearthstone video. Hearthstone is full of decisions at every stage of the game, and the best play to make isn't always clear. Should my minions attack face or trade? Should I clear the opponent's board or develop my own? Should I draw more cards or play for fatigue? The answers ultimately depend on your win condition. During every game, evaluate the matchup and ask yourself, how am I winning this game? Then make decisions to progress towards that goal. In Hearthstone, there are 4 fundamental win conditions: going face, controlling the board, exhausting the opponent, and assembling a combo. Understanding your deck's game plan is crucial to success on ladder, so let's take a closer look at those win conditions and the wild decks built around them. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Tempo Storm Hearthstone YouTube channel to keep up to date on the game's latest developments. When you ask yourself how you're winning the game, sometimes the answer is as simple as reduce my opponent's health to 0. Going face is the most straightforward way to play, and Wild's premier aggro decks, from the OG Pirate Warrior to the current Wild powerhouse Secret Mage, beat the opponent down as quickly as possible. To do so, they hit the ground running with fast minions that can play on every turn, and they keep the damage flowing with minion buffs, weapons, and direct damage spells that go over the top. When aggression is your win condition, think of the game's progress in terms of damage and the opponent's development. You'll usually have a head start on board, but as the game progresses, your opponent will usually develop larger minions or remove your minions and heal. If you don't push damage fast enough, the enemy will eventually stabilize and you'll fall behind, so your priority is to deal damage quickly and keep the game as short as possible. True face decks usually aren't interested in interacting with the opponent's board, since if you put on enough pressure, then the opponent will want to trade with you. With that being said, aggro decks often include some disruptive cards and efficient removal to help push through the opponent's minions, as well as draw cards to refill against the opponent's removal. Again, disrupting the enemy's game plan and drawing cards is not your primary goal and should only be done as needed to keep the pressure on. If you dominate the early game and deal damage fast enough, you'll put yourself in a position where a final burst of damage will be enough to seal the deal. Aggro decks start out fast and lean, but they tend to run out of steam against an opponent with effective defenses. As the meta develops, some of these aggro decks become more interactive and develop the tools to keep control of the board while still attempting to apply pressure against more defensive strategies. These decks are typically called tempo or mid-range, and their game plan is to gain control of the board quickly and leverage their dominance to achieve victory. 2 of the most common examples of this archetype in Wild are Odd Rogue and Even Shaman. Both of these decks can apply early pressure, but they also include more tools to interact, like Odd Rogue's Hero Power and Magic Carpet, and Even Shaman's Jade Claws and Devolve, as well as larger threats that carry well going into the late game. The hallmarks of this playstyle are value trades, 2-for-1s, and chip damage. Use your weapons and removal to clear the opponent's minions while your minions attack their face. Your minions will usually be more powerful than your opponent's, so look for opportunities to use them to kill your opponent's weaker minions for free. If you're dealing damage while managing the board, you can eventually convert your board control into lethal setups. Going into the mid and late game, always take a moment each turn to check if you have lethal or can create a lethal setup for the next turn. If you're in danger of losing control of the board, it may be appropriate to shift into a face attack plan even if you don't have an immediate lethal setup, as long as you have a reasonable chance to draw into it. Your role in the game can be aggressive or defensive, depending on the matchup and state of the board, so always take the time to evaluate your position and recognize when to pivot. Control of the board is powerful, and control decks take that philosophy to the extreme. Instead of developing threats early, they take a reactive approach to manage the board and lock the opponent out of the game. The classical control deck can simply let the opponent run out of cards and die to fatigue, but modern control decks like Reno Warlock and Jade Druid utilize an inevitable win condition of some form of another. Regardless of how the game is closed out, their true win condition is to combine relentless waves of removal, life gain, and disruption to deny the opponent any chance for victory. Against the aggro and mid-range decks we've already discussed, playing control is pretty straightforward, since all you need to do is remove their threats and stay alive. Against other late game decks and combo decks, things can get a little dicey. Against them, it often comes down to how well your interaction lines up with their threats and how much value your deck can generate. For example, in the Reno Lock versus Jade Druid matchup, Jade Idol is the deciding factor, since Jade Druid druid can shuffle idols back into their deck infinitely and never die to fatigue. However, if the Reynad player has Skulking Geist in the deck, they can deny the Jade player of their inevitability. Having the right answer can have a huge impact, so control decks usually tune themselves against an expected meta. If your answers don't line up to your opponent's threats, your passive approach will eventually buckle to your opponent's pressure. Against other late game decks, you'll have to plan out your endgame well in advance. In those matchups, one player will be better suited to play for fatigue, so be prepared to pivot to apply pressure or land an over-the-top finisher and take the fight to your opponent if you need to. So far, we focused on win conditions that revolve around combat and controlling the board, but there are other ways to win. Combo decks focus on assembling powerful combination of cards to overpower the opponent, often winning the game in one turn. The most prominent example in Wild, Snip Snap Warlock, focuses on drawing Mech Warper, summoning Portal, and Snip Snap, then uses them to build a massive board full of virtually infinite Snip Snaps, or buffs a single minion to attack for lethal immediately. This style of deck wants to draw its combo as quickly as possible, so rather than developing the board, you'll spend your time drawing cards and buying time to get there with removal, life gain, and other stall cards. Powerful synergies abound in Hearthstone, and not every deck that takes advantage of them is aiming for a one-turn kill. Instead, some combo decks build a critical mass of synergies that snowball to an overwhelming board and win over multiple turns. One such deck is Mech Hand Buff Paladin, which uses Mech Warper and Galvanizer in combination with Grime Street Smuggler and Magnetic buffs to build massive minions and run away with the game quickly. Whether you're going for an OTK or building a critical mass, you have two priorities: assembling the combinations you need to win and staying alive long enough to get there. Like the control decks, you'll want to manage the board closely and look for opportunities for your removal cards to clear multiple minions. Once you have the combo or critical mass assembled, you want to convert it into a win as quickly as possible. As always, be aware of your opponent's plan to beat you, which is usually going to revolve around either disrupting your combo or beating you before your combo comes online. Play order and execution are more important with combo decks than with aggro or control, since improper order can sometimes cause your combo to fail, so whenever you play a combo deck, take the time to practice your combo and study gameplay videos and streams before you hit the ladder. Regardless of your win condition, it's important to understand that every deck has a game plan for victory, whether you're playing for the early game or the late game, and whether you're building a dominating board or an overwhelming combo. If you understand your deck's game plan, it makes your decisions easier as you pilot your deck of choice to legend. If this breakdown was useful for you, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with our other Hearthstone content. Thanks for watching!